Also, let's get on to the petroleum industry. The downstream sector operators are up in arms against the Dangote refinery in a major anti-reform challenge ever seen in the country's history, especially since President Bola Ahmed Tinubu announced at his inauguration on May 29, 2023, that petrol subsidy is gone. The junior oil workers under the new paying umbrella and the Depot and Petroleum Marketers Association want the Dangote refinery to stop the distribution of its products via its own haulage, while demanding a subsidy estimate of 1.3 trillion naira from Dangote refinery. Now let's bring on my guest on this from our Abuja studios, Kelvin Emmanuel, an economic and energy sector analyst. Good evening. We thank you very much for your time tonight, as always, on the Arise Exchange.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a privilege to be here.
Thank you. Let's begin the conversation. What are the realities and the implications of the subsidy is gone proclamation of President Tinubu on May 29, 2023? What did it really mean?
Well, you know, so let's walk it back a little. The reality is that between 2023, when the President declared a statement at inauguration, today, petrol price has gone up about 362%. Nigeria was spending circa $4 to $5 billion on a yearly basis in under recovery, which was questionable. And the reason why it's questionable is because they were operating direct sale, direct purchase program, where they moved from sending Nigeria's crude under the domestic crude intervention stock, 445,000 barrels per day, to 13 refineries abroad, to DSDP, where they were exchanging that same crude oil feedstock to international commodity traders to bring in the equivalent of petrol products they claimed that Nigerians are consuming. The regulator claims that Nigeria consumes from 60 to 70, went to 80, then it went to 92 million, then it dropped. Currently, the regulator claims Nigeria consumes 49.6 million liters, which they cannot prove. And that was the basis on which, you know, they were giving out crude, FOB, to bring back petrol in a crude oil swap, direct sale, direct purchase, and went to vendor financing program, delivered at place. But the discrepancy are two. Number one, if you cannot provide an empirical framework by which you measure accurately how much Nigeria consumes, it means that the equivalent of crude you give out to international traders is questionable. And some of those crude is actually diverted. Number two, if you cannot match the amount of levies you generate per liter sold to the bridging claims for Petroleum Equalization Fund before subsidy was removed, then it means there's a discrepancy. And records have shown from investigation that about 47% of these volumes are actually not accounted for. That's where we were before Dangote came. Endless fuel queues, strikes. You had a situation in January 2022 when two companies, I won't mention their names, brought in products that had methanol over 15%. You know, methanol is what is usually used to cure petrol when the octane rating is below what they call anti-knocking ratio. And that led to, when you have methanol in too much, excessive quantity, what it does is that it leads to corrosion of the gasket and it blows the carburetor. And people's engine got damaged, especially in Lagos, and nothing happened. No, where are we today? We're at a situation today where from spending $28 billion per year, most of the FX the central bank had for balance of payments or external reserves was used to import products, transportation fuels, petrol, Jet A1 diesel, and he had a few people profiting from subsidy claims and a few people setting the price, government paying under recovery, and under recovery volumes that cannot be verified, to actually backward integration through import substitution. Now, Dangote today is importing about $650 million worth of crude per month from mostly the US into Nigeria, and is refining, is exporting urea. Nigeria was importing 300,000 metric tons of urea before he started. He's not just exporting petrol, diesel and Jet A1. For the first time in the last 2 years, you can see that he exported petrol for the first time ever to America. He's one of the largest suppliers of Jet A1 used for aeroplanes to the UK and to the European Union, right? He's also exporting the likes of carbon black. Carbon black is used for plastic coating, is used for inkjets. Carbon black is used for tires manufacturing. He's exporting polypropylene crystals,
yes.
Petrochemical feedstock
yes.
derivative. You know, so you can see that he's broadening Nigeria's export, and he's been consequential in improving the GDP of Nigeria.
I got that. Subsidy is gone as a reform proclamation by Mr. President. That's my question. What does that mean in terms of subsidies gone?
Well, what it means basically is that, you know, you've activated Sections 205 of the Petroleum Industry Act, which says that the government is no longer the one controlling the pricing for PMS in Nigeria by applying an under-recovery to peg the price. So you've moved to a market system where the market is open for players to compete. Exactly. But that has also led to inflation. That's
the point. That's the point. So Mr. President kicked the can into the courtyards of the private sector. That's what it means, really.
Yes, that's what it means.
So that's what that statement meant on May 29, 2023.
Yeah, that's what that statement means. But it also means that the private companies in the midstream sector have the confidence to be able to deploy capital to invest because before 2020, Nigeria had no midstream sector.
Yeah, but we've got Dangote refinery now coming in with a deep pocket and put up the refinery. And that is the reality of reforms that are imperative in the downstream, midstream sector, vis-a-vis the reforms that have catalyzed investment in the upstream segment of the industry. So we've seen reforms in the upstream sector, but subsidy has been the Achilles heels of the downstream sector, isn't it? Now, the question, why is it being kicked against?
I didn't get that question, please. Can you come
again? Yeah, my question is this. Why are folks in the downstream sector kicking against a reform proclamation by Mr. President that subsidy is gone, that the private sector now have to take control of that segment of the market?
Oh, okay, are you referring to the fact that DAPPMAN is asking Dangote for subsidy to be able to sell his product?
Yes.
You know, it's interesting, the back and forth between Dangote and DAPPMAN. And, you know, you could see that Femi Otedola, who was the founder of DAPPMAN in 2002, released a statement today. DAPPMAN claiming that he's trying to take them out of business. Look, it's a free market, it's capitalism. The DAPPMAN is asking for privileges that only the refiner who has invested $20 billion should have. You know, if they want to be able to sell at the same price that the refinery is selling, to be able to compete to about more than 30,000 retail filling stations around Nigeria, they should put their capital together and go and invest in a refinery and compete with Dangote. They shouldn't be asking for 70 naira for, you know, freight and loading and another 5 naira for pumping on about 75 million liters of petrol and diesel daily. That amounts to about 1.5 trillion naira a year, or $1 billion. It doesn't make any sense.
So is that the subsidy? Is that part of the subsidy that Mr. President said is gone? That those practices.
The president said it's gone because the government was basically paying for subsidy that he couldn't afford. Nigeria could not afford this subsidy.
Yes.
Okay? Before Tinubu took over, the CBN was technically insolvent, even if they don't like to say it, and they can't say it officially. They were technically insolvent because they were owing FX forwards. They had FX swaps of $4 billion. Their FX swaps, was more than $10 billion. Their FX forwards was about $7 billion. Right? You could see that they released a statement recently saying that they had returned monies for about $2 billion outstanding that they appointed Deloitte to audit, right? So you had a situation where they were basically technically insolvent and they couldn't meet up with their balance of payment obligations. And they had these FX bills from subsidy payments. They were basically using the crude oil receipts that were coming in that they were supposed to use to do balance of payment because, you know, Dangote principle in central banking said that you must always have net external reserves unencumbered that is equivalent to your 1-year import bill. Nigeria didn't have net external reserves that was equivalent to 3 months import bill. That has changed. Because you've had a situation where the president has said, we're no longer going to be in this game, is going to push the burden to the consumers. And that was why the petrol prices went up by 362% over 24 months.
So Dangote,
right? It doesn't make any sense that the private sector is...
So the private sector, Dangote refinery came
it doesn't make any sense
with the muzzle.
That the private sector...
Yes.
He came in with the muzzle. He has economies of scale. It's a brand new refinery, right? He has 650,000 installed capacity. He's modifying his crude distillation unit, 700,000 installed capacity. It's currently at 78% capacity utilization. doing 44 million liters of PMS on a daily basis. It doesn't make any sense that a group of businessmen, traders who are used to importing products into Nigeria could not see the future, and the future has finally come, and now they are asking for subsidy to be able to compete when the market has moved. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so the demands from Dangote refinery, do you think is in tune with the reforms that the government wants to see in the downstream sector?
It absolutely is in tune with the reforms that the government wants to see in the downstream sector because, look, Dangote is fully able to backwardly integrate Nigeria's energy supply for white transportation fuels, and it's also doing that for non-transportation fuels, and is a major factor in not just the improvement in Nigeria's GDP, but it's also a major factor in the net export proceeds that is coming to Nigeria for exporting several products out of Nigeria. You know, I like to give an example of the reason why the government needs to pay attention to Nigeria's industrial base and supply chain. You see, Nigeria needs 3 areas to be able to unlock industrialization. It needs energy, which is petroleum refining, petrochemical refining. Yeah, for it to succeed at that, it needs to be able to accelerate the production of crude oil and gas and move from just associated gas to non-associated gas, right? Nigeria needs power. For it to succeed at that, it also needs gas. And for it to really succeed at that, it needs non-associated gas because the 7.6 billion scoff that they get from drilling crude on a daily basis is not able to, meet up with the demand for gas by gas-based industries, both for the domestic market and the export markets. The third area is Nigeria needs maritime operations. It needs to open its maritime operations and decentralize maritime operations from the Western Maritime Corridor from Lagos to the Eastern Maritime Corridor. If you do that, you're going to open up trade and manufacturing in the eastern flank and really accelerate growth and development in the economy. These are the 3 bases that Nigeria needs for industrialization. It also, the 4th area I didn't mention, it also needs steel. And look, there's been back and forth recently. Dangote did a press conference and he talked about the fact that Ajaokuta is dead. And not just because he talked about that. Look, Nigeria doesn't have the high-grade iron ore it needs to produce steel. It doesn't have it. So, the West African neighbors has it. But, this clinging of clinging to state-owned assets, like, for example, the government-owned refineries, NNPC refineries, the government has been clinging to for more than 20 years, it has sunk cost fallacy of $18 billion and has not produced anything. It's clinging on to Ajaokuta that is cost the government about $500 million in arbitration cost over the last 3 years. It doesn't make any sense.
I understand that, Kelvin. You see, if the government, if the president, Mr. President says subsidy is gone, says this is in the best interest of Nigerians. Now you've got Nupeng, DAPPMAN, and others coming through and said, no, we're demanding subsidy from the man who's done $22 billion refinery investment. I'm trying to understand here, on whose side should I pitch my tent? Mr. President says subsidy is gone. Things should be easy for Nigerians. Some folks says, look, if you set up a $20 billion refinery, we have to pay us some subsidy because we want XY, a price, as it were, and pass it on. And Dangote says, no, I don't want to do that. So I'm trying to resolve that, and you are the expert. And that's what I'm trying to find out here. What realities do we want? What clarification do we need right now? And from whom should we get that?
Look, the law is very clear. It's in sections 43(1), 1B of the Trade Union Act, sections 12(6) of the Trade Union Act, says that you cannot force non-members of your union to join your union. And I've always said that Nupeng, Pengasin, NLC, they are not acting on their own. They are proxies for people who realize that the game is over for them. It doesn't make any sense because Nupeng, the same Nupeng and their ilk are the same people who oppose the sale of Port Harcourt and Warri refinery that would have saved Nigeria $18 billion that the government would have deployed to critical national infrastructure, And when they opposed the sale of Port Harcourt and Warri refineries to Blue Star Consortium in 2006. And late President Umar Yad reversed that sale. The same Nupeng is trying to sabotage Dangote refinery that is basically come as a way to not just backwardly integrate through import substitution the demand for white transportation fuels, but also to expand Nigeria's manufacturing base, and create more export revenues from what it exports out of Nigeria. Dangote has 4,000 CNG trucks, that he's brought, that is energy efficient and that aligns with Nigeria's energy transition goals.
Well,
and he's promised that he's going to bring electric trucks. Those trucks alone are going to create six jobs each, or 24,000
Kelvin,
jobs.
I'm worried.
He employs 40,000 people in Lagos.
I'm worried. I haven't heard, there's been a little bit of a silence from the regulators in the midstream and the downstream sector over the last few days with regards to what's going on. Nupeng folks, DAPPMAN guys, they want to block the Dangote refinery gates. They don't want all of that to happen. I want to hear from the regulators. Why are they silent?
It's a good question you asked. I've always said that I don't believe in Farouk Ahmed's leadership of NMDPRA because there's so many sections of the Petroleum Industry Act that is not being implemented. And one of those sections is the fact that all the players in the midstream and downstream sector have not been playing by the same rules. One set of rules applies to Dangote, another set of rules applies to other members. For example, I'll give you a perfect example, okay? The regulator till today still does not have a lab. In the PIA, it says, based on the regulatory gazette from the PIA, that the regulator is supposed to have a lab to test for products when they approach the ports in Nigeria. They don't have a lab to test for products. Most of these test results, certificate of quality that is issued, will not survive forensic audit. So if the basis for pricing PMS depends on the quality specification of the product, then there is a question of, is it fair to hold Dangote to the PIA section 317(11) of the PIA and hold the other marketers who import products into Nigeria, even if Dangote has sufficient capacity to solve Nigeria's petroleum needs, to another standard? So for me, I don't feel like NMDPRA is up to it because they don't have competent leadership. But also, I will reckon that the posture from the State House indicates that Mr. President has moved on. He's not interested in getting into the fights of strikes and queues and threats from the labor unions that he had before Dangote took over. Because since Dangote started producing PMS in Nigeria last year, August, Nigeria has never had strikes or queues. There's never been it. And he's challenged the sector to come up with more efficient, comply with the Petroleum Industry Act, and is even challenging them to put money together, invest in the refinery, and compete with him.
Okay, so
I don't think the government is interested in going back to the past.
Okay, so this is a reform or die. Is that it?
This is a reform or die, and the game is over. The game is over for DAPPMAN. The game is over for Moman. It's either they align with Dangote refinery or they die. If they don't want to die, then they should go and invest and build a refinery to compete with him. I was expecting that when Femi Otedola sold FO about 7-8 years ago, because he saw the future coming, that they were going to also see the future and begin to change their business model. Their business model is gone. The idea that you're going to have Dangote give you 1.5 trillion naira discount on a yearly basis to pump product to your depot to be able to sell at the same price to the retail station owners doesn't make any sense, because Dangote is not owing them any money. He borrowed money. He still has $3.8 billion of debt to pay for the refinery that he's built. $3.8 billion of debt. He's a businessman.
I know. I was there 10 years ago, or 12 years ago, actually, when the papers were signed with the international banks and some local banks for that particular refinery. So I understand, I knew where it all started. But thank you so much for your time, as always, for those insights on the oil sector and the economy. So thank you so much, Kelvin, Emmanuel, economist and energy industry analyst. We'll touch base with you as the development continues.